Hey guys, welcome to my channel. My name is Felicia and I'm a Nigerian YouTuber based in Lagos. If you're new to my channel, thank you for stopping by to watch this tutorial. I create content around fashion, lifestyle, sewing and DIYs, and if you're into this kind of content, please click on the red subscribe button to join this family. I create stuff like this and much more, okay? And to my returning subscribers, thank you so much for always coming back to support your girl. I appreciate each and every single one of you. So in today's tutorial, I'm going to be teaching you guys how to make this kaftan dress I am rocking right here. It's quick and it's simple, and anybody can do this once you have a sewing machine to work with. So guys, for this tutorial I used 1.5 yards of fabric in total. This pink fabric right here, this is a Duchess fabric, and I used just 1 yard of it, and then I used another colored print for the rest of the cutting. I'm also going to be using a lining for the pocket and for the inner facing of the neck, as well as an interfacing. So right now the first thing for me to do is to fold this 1 yard of fabric I have here into 4. And once I've folded that out nice and neat, I'm going to just go on to mark the length of the width of my fabric. If you notice, the fray ends are not so equal, so I'm just going to be marking my 18 inches all the way down, which is the actual width of the fabric after it's been folded, since it's 1 yard of course. So I'm just marking 18 inches all the way to the bottom so that I can just trim off all those edges that are not straight. So the key is to just have straight ends just at that point where I'm marking my measurements now. Once that's marked down, I'm just going to trim off the fray ends just to get a very straight line. The next thing I'm going to do is to also ensure that the length of my fabric is also equal. I'm right now cutting off the uneven ends of my fabric. Next thing for me to do now is to confirm what I have on the length, and there I have 29 inches. But before I go on, I'm just going to mark my neck. Right now I'm marking the width, and I'm using 3 inches for the width of my neck, and I'm going to be using 3.5 inches for the depth of my neckline. Once I've marked those points, I'm just going to use my pattern master to connect the 2 points in a curve. Do whatever you want at this point. If you want a V-neck, you might as well mark out the V-neck shape and cut as you want. But right now I'm working on a round neck, so I'm just going to cut on that line that I just marked right there. Now the next thing I'll do now is to take my lining piece. And I'm going to be folding it again into 4, but this time around I'm just going to fold it in such a way that I have 8 inches on each end of my folding. So I'm just going to mark 8 inches on the length side and then 8 inches on the width side, and I'm now going to mark 8 inches all around from the tippy point that I have there. Mark 8 inches around, and then I'm going to be having that line where I'm going to be cutting on. If I didn't remember to mention, what I'm using this right now for is for the inner facing of the neck, so that I don't have any seam line on the neckline of my dress, okay, so that it looks nice and neatly finished. So I'm just cutting that off now, and I'm going to just take my main piece of fabric and place it on this lining piece I cut right now, and then I'm just going to secure it with a pin, and then I'm going to cut off that extra bit of my lining, just using the neckline, cutting along the neckline of my actual fabric. So once that's done, I'm going to go on now on the folded end. On just one side of the folded end of the fabric, I'm going to be cutting open 2.5 inch, as well as on the lining as well. And the next thing I'm doing now is folding my interfacing in 4 as I did with the lining, and I'm just cutting the exact shape of the facing right here. I'll be ironing this piece later together. That's the interfacing and the lining. Now I'm moving on to the next thing, which is to cut the remaining length of my dress. Remember that I had 29 inches from my initial fabric, the pink one, but I'm working with a length of 36 inches. So I'm going to be marking out the rest of the length of my dress. At this point, feel free to use whatever length you're working with, but I'm working with 36 inches and I'm already just adding 7 extra inches, but I'm also including my allowance, half-inch allowance for joining these two pieces and 1-inch allowance for my hemming allowance. Okay, so right now I realize that my colored print isn't at the same length as my actual fabric, so I'm just slightly trimming off the excess bit, but I'm not cutting in a straight line because I don't want to reduce the length of the sleeve, right? So I'm just blending it in a slanted line, and that works. If your fabric is just all right and the length of the fabric is equal, you don't need to do that step. Now the next thing I'm doing is cutting out the pocket shape. All I did was to fold this fabric into 4. This is also the lining fabric still, so I folded into 4, and I'm just marking down 7 inches from the top of that line. I only drew that line just so that I have a straight line to cut on. Okay, so I'm just marking 7 inches at that point, and I'm also marking 1 inch inwards. Then I'm now going to shape the pocket. So this is the pocket shape. Whatever shape you want to do, that's fine, but this is the kind of pocket shape I use all the time. Okay, so I'm just going to cut along this line, cut a nice and neat line all around my pocket shape. Once I'm done cutting out the pocket shape, I'm just going to cut open the folded edge of my fabric, so I have 4 individual pieces of pockets. Now here are my pieces, my interfacing, my pockets, and the main body of my dress. So I'm going to be going over to the sewing machine now to join these pieces together. Right here on my sewing machine, I'm first going to join the extra length of my dress, and I'm going to be joining it using a 1/2 inch allowance, and I'm just going to join this side and then at the other side also. Now once I've joined the two sides, I only showed you guys one side, but yeah, you get the point. I'm going to be joining the facing of my neck. I'm going to first of all be sewing on 1/2 inch on the slit area of this facing. Secured it with a pin, and I'm just going to run 1/2 inch all around, straight down the line, then curve a bend and turn around, and then sew all the way back to the top of the slit. Once I'm done with that, I'm going to now notch my allowance. I'm notching this because this is a curve and I need it to lie flat, so always notch whenever you sew on a curve. And once I'm done notching it, I'm going to top stitch very close to the seam line, making sure that the extra bit of my allowance is lying on the lining, that's on the facing direction, not on the main fabric. So I'm just going to top stitch as close as possible to the joining of my main fabric and my facing, and run it all the way to the end. The reason why we do this is so that your facing of the neck remains nicely hidden inside the dress and it doesn't keep popping up, and this is what it looks like. Now the next thing I'm going to do is to now sew on the rest of the roundness of the neck. I'm going to be sewing on 1/2 inch all around the neckline from the starting point all the way to the end. please do well to give this video a huge thumbs up, because I know you're here to gain some value and I'm sure you're getting value for it. Okay, just give it a thumbs up and let's continue watching. Okay. So once I'm done with the neck, I'm just going to notch it again. Remember, this is a curve, the neckline is curved, so I'm just going to notch. But as I'm notching, I have to be careful not to get into my sewing line so that it doesn't gosh, don't just let it get into the sewing line. Okay, so once I'm done notching, I'm now going to top stitch the same way I did when I was sewing on the slit area. Remember to make sure that your allowance is lying on the facing side of your fabric, and then just top stitch as close as possible to the joining of the main fabric and the facing, as close as possible to it. Oh yeah, one more thing, leave me comments down below if you're stuck or it's kind of confusing. Okay, so this is what it looks like once I'm done top stitching my inner facing. Now I'm back on my table and I'm just here to mark the beginning point and the end point of my pockets. So I'm going to be using 16 inches because I'm a tall girl, but if you're like not as tall, you can use 14 or 15 inches to mark the beginning point of your pocket. So I marked 16 inches right there, and I'm going to place my pocket the right side facing the right side of the fabric. Okay, and I'm going to pin it in place. I'm going to do this for all the 4 sides of this fabric, of this dress here. Now it's getting to a dress here. So I'm going to do this on the 4 sides, and then I'm over on my serger or my overlocker, whatever you want to call it. I'm here to weave the 2 pieces together. And once I'm done weaving it, I'm going to weave all 4 pieces actually of the pocket to the main dress, and then I'm going to be taking it over to my sewing machine, and I'm just going to top stitch as well. The reason why we top stitch all the time is to make sure that every piece that is meant to be on the inside of the dress remains on the inside of the dress. That's that for that. Okay, make sure you're top stitching on the wrong side, whatever works for you. Okay, so the next thing to do is to join the sides of my dress. Okay, so I'm just joining it on a 1-inch allowance from the bottom of the dress all the way through to the pocket. So once I've gotten out of the pocket area, I'm just going to take my tape rule from the shoulder area and mark from the shoulder point. I'm going to be marking 11 inches for my sleeve opening. Okay, 10 inches still works fine, so you might want to use 10 inches if you're on a slimmer side, but I just wanted it to be really big and free, so I'm marking 11 inches right there for my pocket opening, and I'm going to continue on my 1-inch allowance sewing all the way to that line that I just marked. On the pocket area, please feel free to use 1/2 inch when you've curved into the pocket, but once you're back on the main dress, use a 1-inch allowance because it's going to help with your hemming. Okay, so I'm just here giving you guys a closer look. I have weaved all the sides of my dress, as you can see, and that's where the pocket opening starts. There's no stitch on there, but the stitch goes on from that point all the way round the pocket and then back down to the end of the dress. Okay, I hope this is really clear, but we're going to be moving on to the next step, which is to iron the facing down to the dress. Okay, we don't want our facing flying out of this dress here because we need to be fly. Okay, so first thing I'm doing is to iron my facing, making sure that the facing isn't on the outer side of the dress at all. So once I've ironed it nice and flat, I'm going to be putting in the hemming gum as it's called in Nigeria. I don't know what it's called abroad, but it's called hemming gum. Yeah, so you're just going to place this hemming gum as close as possible to the edge of the facing and iron it down to the dress, making sure that everything is nice and flat on your table so that you don't have wrinkles and all that. But even if you make the mistake to make wrinkles on it, you can easily rip it off by applying more steam to it and then gently arrange your fabric to make sure it's nice and flat. Okay, so once I'm done with the facing, I'm going to go on to the sleeve. I'm going to just place the hemming gum all around the sleeve and just fold it in like so. This is the reason I asked you to leave a 1 inch allowance as against a ½ inch allowance, so that you have the space and for your hemming. Okay, so I'm just folding in that 1 inch I left and I'm ironing it down. I'll be doing this same thing to the other sleeve as well, and then we'll move on to the lower part of the dress. On the lower part, I'm just also taking in that 1 inch I left also on the length. So I'm taking it in and using the hemming gum underneath and folding it all around, and that brings us to the end of this tutorial. Okay, I hope you guys found this tutorial useful. Look how neat my neckline looks. There's no seam line, so it doesn't look tacky. There's no seam line whatsoever outside, showing on the outside of the dress, and I'm really loving the look of this dress. I've gone ahead to make more for myself because, you know, it's just a really nice and simple dress. If you enjoyed this tutorial, please do well to subscribe if you haven't. Give this video a thumbs up, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Okay, leave me comments too, and stay fabulous until then. Bye.